The first time I saw him, he was nothing more than a shadow in the yard, just a streak of movement between the trees. A flash of fur, low to the ground, slipping in and out of the bushes like a ghost. It took me a few days to realize he wasn't just passing through. He was watching. He was hungry. I could see it in the way he moved, cautious but desperate, his thin frame barely visible in the fading evening light. His fur was dull, matted in places, his ribs pressing against his skin. He was waiting, hoping. But for what? I wasn't sure. That night, I left out a small dish of food on the deck. I didn't know if he would come back, but something in me hoped he would. The next morning, the food was gone. Not a crumb left behind. For weeks, this was our routine. I'd set the food out. He'd eat when he thought no one was looking. And then, just like that, he'd disappear into the trees again. But one night, as I stepped outside to refill his bowl, he didn't run. Instead, he froze, staring at me with wide, golden eyes. It was the closest I'd ever seen him. My heart pounded. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. And then, in an instant, he was gone, vanishing into the dark. That was the first time I realized he wasn't just a stray cat looking for food. He was scared. He had been on his own for a long time, maybe his whole life. And somewhere along the way, he had learned that people couldn't be trusted. I didn't know what had happened to him before he found my yard, but I did know one thing. I wasn't going to give up on him. I started talking to him. Every time I put the food out, I'd whisper softly, "Hey, buddy, it's okay. You're safe here." I didn't expect him to respond, but I wanted him to hear my voice, to know that I wasn't a threat. Slowly, things began to change. He stopped running quite so fast. He started watching me from a little closer. He still wouldn't let me near him, but he wasn't disappearing the second he saw me anymore. And then one day, he did something that shocked me. Instead of waiting until I left, he took a few steps toward the food, while I was still standing there. It wasn't much, just a few hesitant steps. But it was enough. That was the moment I named him. Cinnamon. It suited him. His fur, now that I could see it better, was a deep reddish brown, like the spice. And just like Cinnamon, there was something warm about him. Even if he didn't trust me yet, I could feel it. Naming him made it real. He wasn't just a stray anymore. He was someone. But I knew that food wasn't enough. I wanted to give him a home, a safe place where he didn't have to be afraid anymore. The problem was, Cinnamon wasn't sure he wanted one. For weeks, I left the back door open just a crack, hoping he'd take the hint. He'd come to the doorway looking inside, but he never crossed that invisible line. It was like he wanted to, but something deep inside him just wouldn't let him. Then came the cold, the first real freeze of the season. That night, I watched him sitting outside, curled up against the wind, his fur fluffed out in a desperate attempt to stay warm. I opened the door. "Come inside, Cinnamon." He hesitated, and then he stepped forward, one paw over the threshold, then another. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He just walked in. It felt like a dream. I held my breath, watching as he looked around the kitchen, his tail twitching slightly. He still wasn't sure about me. He wouldn't let me touch him. But he was inside. And that was more than I ever thought possible. That first night, I let him stay as long as he wanted. I didn't push him. He explored cautiously, sniffing at the furniture, checking every corner of the room. And then, just as suddenly as he had come in, he slipped back out into the night. But the next night, he came back. And the night after that. Each time he stayed a little longer. And then, one evening, something incredible happened. I was sitting on the floor, quietly watching him, when he took a step toward me. Then another. My heart pounded as he inched closer, his golden eyes locked onto mine. And then, he rubbed against my leg. It was the first time he had ever shown me affection. The first time he had chosen me. That night, he curled up beside me and purred. From that moment on, Cinnamon was home. Now, he's part of my family. He sleeps curled up at the foot of my bed, follows me around the house, and sits on my lap when I watch movies. He still likes to go outside, but now he always comes back, because he knows this is where he belongs. I didn't rescue Cinnamon. He chose to trust me. And that's the most incredible thing of all. There are so many animals out there like Cinnamon. Scared, alone, unsure if they'll ever find a place where they're safe. If you've ever thought about helping a stray, I can tell you this. Patience changes lives. Kindness changes lives. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to say, "You are safe. You are home." If you believe in giving animals like Cinnamon a second chance, consider supporting your local animal rescues. Adopt if you can. Donate if you're able. Share their stories. Because every animal deserves a chance to find their way home.